Again, we hear these words from Ephesians chapter 4, and this is the message. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline, not in fits and starts, but steadily pouring yourselves out for each other in acts of love, alert at noticing differences and quick at mending fences. You pray with me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh upon all of us gathered here and upon me. Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Gracie Allen, the wife and comic partner of comedian George Burns, was a brilliant and perceptive woman. She left this message in her papers to be discovered by her husband after his death. Never put a period where God has placed a comma. Again, never put a period where God has placed a comma. It became the inspiration for the motto of the United Church of Christ, God is still speaking, with a comma as a simple, evocative symbol to graphically represent the power of the idea. In writing that note, Gracie was encouraging her husband, George, to remember that life has many chapters. George was 68 years old when Gracie died, and rather than place a period after his career, George Burns went on to star in a number of movies, including playing God twice. He died at age 100, having lived the life of a comma. Gracie Allen's message to George Burns reminds us that there is no period after the names of the clergy spouses, and lay members who we honor today, who have labored that we would be in ministry in the place we call the Baltimore-Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church. Each of them have lived lives poured out for others, and because of that, their influence and impact lives on in us. Some years ago, a group of Christians from the United States visited Nicaragua during the war-torn days. And while there, a young man in the group was killed by Contras. This left the group confused and despondent. On the next Sunday, a memorial service was held. And from the altar, the priest said, "The peace of the Lord be with you." And people from the congregation, the Nicaraguan people, began to embrace these Americans and say paz or peace. During the communion service, there was a pause. The congregation was silent. And then someone called out a name, and in one voice, everyone responded, "Presente." Another name was called out, and once again, the response was "Presente." During the service, at least 20 names were called out, and each time the same response, "Presente." The pastor leading the group of U.S. Christians did not understand what was happening until he heard the name Oscar Romero. And then he realized that all the names were those of people who had died. And from that moment on, he joined in shouting, "Presente." Presente. Presente is used by school children to answer roll call. At the Lord's table, the word presente means in our midst or present with us. Shouting presente in that worship service was a way of proclaiming the reality of the communion of all saints. Although those persons named had all died, their presence and their influence was still felt. Today, as we gather and remember those who have departed this life since our last annual conference, we too shout presente. And we shout presente for all who are among that number that no one can count. We shout presente because their presence and influence is still felt. We shout presente because the seeds they planted live on and bear fruit in us. Presente. These words of Jesus are often heard at memorial services. From John chapter 12, very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Jesus said a single seed bears much fruit. So then none of us is a self-contained unit. None of us is an island unto ourselves. No, our lives and actions influence people we know and even people we will never know. A single seed can bear much fruit. But think about this. What's the purpose of fruit? What's the purpose of an apple tree? To make apples, right? No, the real purpose of an apple tree is to make more apple trees. The fruit contains the seed that multiplies the tree's impact and influence. And the same is true for us. When we realize we are, as vessels of God's love, make a difference in other people's lives. We're all here in this memorial service, remembering and thanking God for the clergy spouses, and lay members who committed their lives to pouring out love. We're here because their lives impacted others by bearing the fruit of love, compassion, caring, and service. We are here because their lives left a mark, an indelible impression on our lives and that of others. Therefore, we rejoice today that their lives are still bearing fruit. Jesus used the words dies to describe what happens when a seed's power is released. In a garden, when a seed dies, it actually germinates. Now, when a seed germinates, new life happens. New growth happens. It's not destroyed. No, it is released to accomplish its mission of bearing much fruit. Do you hear the power in that? The saints remembered today understood this spiritual principle and therefore invested their lives by giving their life to Christ, in a real sense, dying for Christ. It's only in dying to self, dying to selfishness, dying to self-centeredness, dying to sinfulness that a person begins to truly live. The saints, remember today, were all-in Christians. They saw their lives as being multiplied, germinated through their faith and commitment to serving others. And now we see that their lives and faith have germinated in us. That's what Jesus meant when he called us to die for him. Our lives truly germinate when we give them to Jesus. When we give our lives over to Christ, our potential to serve him is released. Seedlings of love are released, which in turn grow into great love. And so we who are disciples go and make disciples. We who are people of faith pass on the faith. We who are shaped in God's love pour out love. Yes. By their lives, those remembered today passed on the faith. These are few of their stories of pouring out love. One pastor poured out love as a prayer warrior and advocate for women. She founded the Women's Veterans Resource Center and received recognition for that work from First Lady Michelle Obama. She also founded the Career Development Business School, which prepared over 4,000 welfare recipients for career positions. She assisted the United Nations and the Namibian political leaders in the transition from apartheid to independence and election of the first African president. Another pastor poured out love as a chaplain and parish minister. During the 1980s, as the HIV/AIDS epidemic grew, he provided pastoral counseling services in the Whitman Walker Clinic. And in retirement, he served as a chairman of the board for the Quality of Life Retreats, a ministry of the Baltimore-Washington Conference dedicated to serving patients and families impacted by HIV/AIDS. Another pastor poured out love on his own missionary journey. He began with ministry in his birthplace, Bombay, India, as the director of Bombay Youth for Christ. His dream would take him then to the West Coast, where he founded Operation Outreach at Seattle Pacific College, which was a short-term summer mission trip for students. His dream continued in this area, where he worked in Baltimore, tasked with desegregating Baltimore City public schools, and later serving in full-time ministry in churches in Frederick and Carroll counties. A clergy spouse poured out love as a teacher, teaching elementary grades in Guilford County, North Carolina, and in Maryland's Washington, Carroll, and Prince George's County. She was known for helping students with learning disabilities and those with discipline problems. She also had a local preacher's license for more than 55 years and worked alongside her husband, teaching Sunday school as chair of different church committees and serving on a mission team to Cuba back in 1956. Before Castro. A lay member poured out love, serving faithfully for 9 years as president of the Annapolis District United Methodist Men, and especially supporting the Baltimore-Washington Conference Prayer Center and United Methodist Men Potato Project. Once again, Gracie Allen's note reminds us that there is no period after the name of those who have labored that we would continue to be in ministry at this appointed time. Do you hear me? There is no period. God has placed the comma there, and the story is not over. Sometimes, while watching a television movie, we can become so engrossed in the storyline, we lose track of time. And at a crucial point in the presentation, 3 words appear on the screen: to be continued. The initial reaction of the viewer may be anger. It seems so unfair that in the midst of enjoying the movie, with scenes that make us laugh, scenes that make us cry, and scenes that are so intense, you can feel the pain and tension and anxiety of the actors, that the words "to be continued" would appear. The second reaction upon seeing those 3 words, "to be continued," is acceptance. You will be able to view the conclusion of the television movie on the next evening or whenever it's scheduled. Life is similar to watching a movie. We become so engrossed in living until we lose all track of time. We have laughed and cried and endured the pains, tensions, anxieties, and frustration of all that comes through the years of one's existence. And then suddenly our beloved is taken away from us. But, the good news is that there are 3 invisible words on the screen of life for all believers: to be continued. And as we remember our honored ones today, we celebrate that good news. We are assured of those hope-filled words: to be continued. Friends, the word of the Lord for us today is this. As we celebrate in this memorial service, as we remember the contributions of our honored ones, as we reflect on the gifts that have been entrusted to us, as we respond in faith, will we live the life of a period or a comma? Will we live lives pouring out love? What will you do with all that's been entrusted to you? If you have ever served in ministries of worship and liturgical arts, would you raise your hand and answer presente? If you have ever served in Christian education as a teacher, youth leader, small group leader, or a student, lift a hand and answer presente. All who have served in ministries of hospitality and welcome, raise your hands and answer presente. All who have served in ministries of congregational care and evangelism, raise your hands and answer presente. All who have served in ministries of administration and stewardship, raise your hands and answer presente. And finally, if you have ever served in a ministry of compassion, mercy, missions, or justice at any time in your life, if by God's grace you have ever just helped somebody stand on your feet as you're able and shout, presente, presente, Presente. You are the fruit of someone's love. Love poured out, extravagant love, all out love. God is still speaking, people. And so as we remember and recall the names of all who have gone before us, can you hear them saying, never put a period where God has placed a comma. Thanks be to God. Amen.